"I didn't want to go to bed till I'd seen you," she said as she folded Julia in her arms and kissed her on both cheeks. She gave Michael a brisk handshake. Julia spent a happy morning in bed reading the Sunday papers. She read first the theatrical news, then the gossip columns, after that the woman's pages, and finally cast an eye over the headlines of the world's news. The book reviews she ignored. She could never understand why so much space was wasted on them. Michael, who had the room next hers, had come in to say good morning, and then gone out into the garden. Presently there was a timid little knock at her door, and Dolly came in. Her great black eyes were shining. She sat on the bed and took Julia's hand. "Darling, I've been talking to Michael. I'm going to put up the money to start you in management." Julia's heart gave a sudden beat. "Oh, you mustn't. Michael shouldn't have asked you. I won't have it. You've been far, far too kind to us already." Dolly leant over and kissed Julia on the lips. Her voice was lower than usual, and there was a little tremor in it. "Oh, my love, don't you know there isn't anything in the world I wouldn't do for you? It'll be so wonderful. It'll bring us so close together, and I shall be so proud of you." They heard Michael come whistling along the passage, and when he came into the room, Dolly turned to him with her great eyes misty with tears. "I've just told her." He was brimming over with excitement. "What a grand woman!" He sat down on the other side of the bed and took Julia's disengaged hand. "What do you say, Julia?" She gave him a little reflective look. "Vous l'avez voulu, Georges Dandin?" "What's that?" "Molière." As soon as the deed of partnership had been signed and Michael had got his theater booked for the autumn, he engaged a publicity agent. Paragraphs were sent to the papers announcing the new venture, and Michael and the publicity agent prepared interviews for him and Julia to give to the press. Photographs of them, singly and together, with and without Roger, appeared in the weeklies. The domestic note was worked for all it was worth. They could not quite make up their minds which of the 3 plays they had it would be best to start with. Then one afternoon, when Julia was sitting in her bedroom reading a novel, Michael came in with a manuscript in his hand. "Look here, I want you to read this play at once. It's just come in from an agent. I think it's a knockout. Only we've got to give an answer right away." Julia put down her novel. "I'll read it now." "I shall be downstairs. Let me know when you've finished, and I'll come and talk it over with you. It's got a wonderful part for you." Julia read quickly, skimming over the scenes in which she was not concerned, but the principal woman's part, the part of course she would play, with concentration. When she had turned the last page, she rang the bell and asked her maid, who was also her dresser, to tell Michael she was ready for him. "Well, what do you think?" "The play's all right. I don't see how it can fail to be a success." He caught something doubtful in her voice. "What's wrong, then? The part's wonderful. I mean, it's the sort of thing that you can do better than anyone in the world. There's a lot of comedy and all the emotion you want." "It's a wonderful part. I know that. It's the man's part." "Well, that's a damned good part, too. I know, but he's 50, and if you make him younger, you take all the point out of the play. You don't want to take the part of a middle-aged man." "But I wasn't thinking of playing that. There's only one man for that, Montvernon. And we can get him. I'll play George." "But it's a tiny part. You can't play that." "Why not?" "But I thought the point of going into management was that we should both play leads." "Oh, I don't care a hang about that. As long as we can find plays with star parts for you, I don't matter. Perhaps in the next play there will be a good part for me, too." Julia leant back in her chair, and the ready tears filled her eyes and ran down her cheeks. "Oh, what a beast I am!" He smiled, and his smile was as charming as ever. He came over to her and, kneeling by her side, put his arms around her. "Lor lumme, what's the matter with the old lady now?" When she looked at him now, she wondered what there was in him that had ever aroused in her such a frenzy of passion. The thought of having sexual relations with him nauseated her. Fortunately, he found himself very comfortable in the bedroom she had furnished for him. He was not a man to whom sex was important, and he was relieved when he discovered that Julia no longer made any demands on him. He thought with satisfaction that the birth of the baby had calmed her down. He was bound to say that he had thought it might, and he was only sorry they had not had one before. When he had 2 or 3 times, more out of amiability than out of desire, suggested that they should resume marital relations, and she had made excuses, either that she was tired, not very well, or had 2 performances next day, to say nothing of a fitting in the morning, he accepted the situation with equanimity. Julia was much easier to get on with. She never made scenes any more, and he was happier than he had ever been before. It was a damned satisfactory marriage he had made, and when he looked at other people's marriages, he couldn't help seeing he was one of the lucky ones. Julia was a damned good sort, and clever as a bag full of monkeys. You could talk to her about anything in the world. The best companion a chap ever had, my boy. He didn't mind saying this. He'd rather spend a day alone with her than play a round of golf. Julia was surprised to discover in herself a strange feeling of pity for him because she no longer loved him. She was a kindly woman, and she realized that it would be a bitter blow to his pride if he ever had an inkling how little he meant to her. She continued to flatter him. She noticed that for long now he had come to listen complacently to her praise of his exquisite nose and beautiful eyes. She got a little private amusement by seeing how much he could swallow. She laid it on with a trowel. But now she looked more often at his straight, thin-lipped mouth. It grew meaner as he grew older, and by the time he was an old man it would be no more than a cold, hard line. His thrift, which in the early days had seemed an amusing, rather touching trait, now revolted her. When people were in trouble, and on the stage they too often are, they got sympathy and kind, friendly words from Michael, but very little cash. He looked upon himself as devilish generous when he parted with a guinea, and a 5-pound note was to him the extreme of lavishness. He had soon discovered that Julia ran the house extravagantly, and insisting that he wanted to save her trouble, took the matter in his own hands. After that, nothing was wasted. Every penny was accounted for. Julia wondered why servants stayed with them. They did because Michael was so nice to them. With his hearty, jolly, affable manner, he made them anxious to please him, and the cook shared his satisfaction when she found a butcher from whom they could get meat a penny a pound cheaper than elsewhere. Julia could not but laugh when she thought how strangely his passion for economy contrasted with the devil-may-care, extravagant creatures he portrayed so well on the stage. She had often thought that he was incapable of a generous impulse, and now, as though it were the most natural thing in the world, he was prepared to stand aside so that she might have her chance. She was too deeply moved to speak. She reproached herself bitterly for all the unkind things she had for so long been thinking of him.